everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Cliff May, founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to see you, Brittany.
The last time you and I talked was about 2 weeks ago at the end of July, and we were talking about how President Trump moved up a deadline on Russia for them to agree to peace with Ukraine, or he was going to slap the country with pretty tough economic sanctions. Now it's a different tune here. We are talking about a meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin. Talk to us about the summit. How did we go from sanctions to summit in 2 weeks?
Well, and just to be absolutely fair, some sanctions he has already imposed, in the sense that they're secondary sanctions. He's imposed sanctions on India, which is one of the major buyers of Russian oil. The Indians are very angry about this, but he said, hey, you're supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. There could be more to come. Well, what delayed it is that the presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, he went to Moscow, he met with Putin, they talked, Witkoff called Trump, and I think it was at Putin's suggestion that the two of them, Putin and Trump, get together. And the decision was made, and it's an interesting decision you might want to talk about, to meet in Alaska and have some talks. So that's how it sort of evolved. President Trump wants to meet with Putin. Various people, I believe Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, look, Trump likes to see the guy face to face and kind of feel him out and know what is possible. I'll just say this. I followed summit meetings for a lot of years. This is different than anything I've seen in this sense. Usually when you have two world leaders like this meeting together, their deputies have met for weeks beforehand. They've worked everything out. By the time they get on the stage, it's choreographed. They know exactly what they're going to say and what they're going to come out with. This is not that. Usually someone like Trump, or President of the United States, doesn't want to leave and say, you know what, I couldn't get anything done. Trump is different. He wants to look Putin in the eye, and I think, and we'll see, Brittany, he's willing to say, I tried, I couldn't get anything done. Putin wouldn't move an inch. Now I'm on to plan B.
What do you make of that? Because as you said, summits are planned for months in advance. This was put together in about a week. I mean, do you think this slapdash in nature, is that going to help President Trump, do you think, or will it hurt President Trump at the table with Putin?
It's neither. Again, it's a different approach to summitry, to summit diplomacy. It's very much Trump's approach, which is I'll see what I can do when I get there. Trump is a lifelong deal maker, and the way he makes deals is not by having a deputy go and make them, and then he signs them the dotted line. What he wants to do, rightly or wrongly, criticize, this is his approach to it, is he wants to sit across the table from Putin. He wants to look him in the eye. He wants to say, here's what I want you to do. We can talk about what that is. Putin will say, here's what I want. And they'll either agree or they'll not agree. Now, I'll just add this, from my point of view and the point of view of a lot of other people, I think we do not want to see Trump negotiating a final deal or trying. What he should be saying, I think, is, look, I've been saying for a long time that I want a ceasefire. I want to stop the killing. Zelensky has agreed to that. I thought you were getting close to agreeing to that. You haven't. But what I'm going to tell you today is I want you to agree to a ceasefire. Otherwise, I'm going to put additional pressure on you in various ways. And then after we have a ceasefire, we can get into negotiations, you with Zelensky, on a final arrangement. But you're not getting concessions in order to have a ceasefire. We have a ceasefire, and that brings us to negotiations. Now, again, I could be wrong, but that's what I'm hoping that Trump will say.
And I mean, to be a fly on that wall during that meeting, I would love to be there, but how do you think Putin then would respond to that? Because apparently, according to the White House press secretary, he was the one who wanted this meeting. So what do you think he's going to say? Is he going to say what President Trump wants to hear? Is he going to be honest? Because history suggests that Putin isn't very truthful and is a bad actor here.
Look, Putin is a former KGB lieutenant colonel. He is a killer, and I say that in the most literal sense of the word. He has killed many of his enemies. They've fallen from hotel balconies. They've been shot to death in the streets of Moscow. He is very much a tough guy. And he is going to. We know what he's want to do. He's going to do what he is going to try to demand. He is to say, "You want a ceasefire? I want you to give me the following things in advance." And we kind of know the list of what he wants. I hope that Trump will say, "I don't even. I know what you want. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a ceasefire. That comes first." But what is Putin going to push for? He said, "Look, I have 20%. I'm occupying 20% of Ukraine. I want you to agree. That's mine. It's not going back. I want more of Ukraine than that. I want you to agree to that. I want to know that Ukraine will be demilitarized in the future. Why? So we can attack Ukraine again. Don't forget, his first attacks on Ukraine were 2014. He attacked Crimea. He occupied Crimea. He annexed Crimea. He also began at that point to incite insurgencies, I would say, with Russian soldiers not in uniform in the eastern part of Ukraine in Donbass. So Putin may be willing to say, I've been eating this sausage in bites. I can take a pause and go for a walk, take a nap, and then have another bite. But I want to make sure I get what I want. And again, we should be very understand what Putin wants. Putin wants Ukraine. He wants to end its independence, end its sovereignty, end its culture, end its language. He wants all that. He wants to drag Ukraine back into what he sees as the Russian Empire, which for a number of years was the Soviet Empire. And he wants to make Ukraine like Belarus is, theoretically independent, but it's a vassal state of Russia at this point, or what Chechnya and Tatarstan are, absolute colonies of Russia. That's what's going to be on his mind. Now, if he gets a lot of pushback from Trump and says that's not what's going to happen, I'm not making these concessions, I can't, and I'm going to put real pressure on you, Putin may have a backup plan. He may have another position where he says, here's what I'll do. And that's where the negotiations will begin.
And then let's say there is that backup plan. How would you want President Trump to respond? Because the White House press secretary said that this is a listening exercise for the president. Does that indicate to you then that he's not going there and to hammer out negotiations? He's there to hear what Putin says and bringing back that to Zelensky? I mean, what does that really mean? Read the tea leaves there.
What I hope that means is he'll say, I'm not negotiating with you. I can't give you Ukrainian land. I can't tell you that this independent country is going to demilitarize. I can't tell you any of that, and I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about a ceasefire. I want to talk about stopping the killing. I want to talk about your soldiers. You have by now about 1 million casualties. You should want to stop that. I don't know that you do, but I want to see if we can bring that to a halt, a cessation of hostilities. I'm not talking about peace, not talking about a path to peace, a cessation of hostilities. Maybe it becomes a truce. Maybe it becomes an armistice. Who knows? Zelensky has to be there for those negotiations. If Putin says, well, then you're not getting it, I'm going to continue to bomb Ukrainians as much as I want, then Trump will say, and I'm going to do what I have to do. And what do I hope he'll do? Serious economic sanctions on Russia, serious secondary sanctions to cut off the funds Putin needs for this war, and an increased supply of munitions to the Ukrainians to defend themselves and fight. Those munitions will include Patriot missiles, which defend their cities from attacks from the air, but also long-range missiles and permission to use those long-range missiles to target military sites inside Russia, not just on Ukrainian territory, but to cause pain to the military inside Russia. Zelensky's been doing some of that with drones. He can do that a lot better with such U.S. munitions as they ATACMS. It's a great word, ATACMS.
President Trump has long ruminated that perhaps Putin is stringing me along a bit here because we have these great conversations. And then I talk to my wife and Melania says, what are you talking about? Russia just bombed Kyiv or bombed a city. The bombs are dropping. Putin's all talk and isn't really acting in the same way that he's talking to you. I mean, do you get the sense, based on what we know about the summit so far, that Putin will string Trump along on Friday?
Putin will absolutely attempt to string Trump along. That will be his goal in these talks. And the question is whether he can succeed. at continuing him to string him along. And you're right, actually, I wrote a column about it, exactly this, for the Washington Times. Melania sees through Putin. Why? I think in part because Melania was born in a communist country and understands these people. And Melania knows such things as what Putin has done in stealing Ukrainian children and brainwashing them so they think of themselves as Russians, not Ukrainian. And she finds that just dreadful, as well she should. And so, yes, so as you say, and Trump has recounted this on a couple of occasions, he'd think he had a good conversation and a productive conversation with Putin, and she'd say, no, you didn't. Because, and by the way, we at FDD, I can show you a chart we did where pretty much every time there was one of these good conversations between Putin and Trump, the next night, residential apartment buildings, hospitals, kindergartens would be attacked by Putin, almost like clockwork.
To that point, then, to that trend, that's alarming. On Saturday night, do you think that's going to happen?
Oh, it absolutely could. It depends on, unless they come out with a ceasefire, unless Trump gets what he wants, which is a good thing to want, a cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, a pause, doesn't mean that they won't go back to fighting. If he doesn't get that, I absolutely expect Putin will say, okay, you've made me angry, and I'm going to take out my anger on Saturday, and I'm going to do it by killing Ukrainian men, women, and children. Again, his aerial attacks are not even aimed at the soldiers. They're aimed mostly at civilians. This is absolutely, it's obviously a war crime. It's obviously outrageous. It obviously should not go unanswered. Putin is trying to subjugate Ukrainians and wipe a neighboring country, a country that wants to be part of Europe and wants to be part of the free world, a fledgling democracy. I've been there when I've been an election monitor over there. They have political parties. They have free press. It's not a perfect country. It's a young country. They have want a future where they are not ruled by essentially a dictator, a czar in the Kremlin.
And this is a bilateral meeting between Trump and Putin. President Trump wants to be there to have a better understanding of how to end the war, according to Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. Do you think he will get that understanding without Zelensky being there? Do you think it's necessary for Zelensky to be there? What do you make of his absence?
Look, I think in this meeting, Trump just wants to take Putin's measure to see where he is now, to see whether he's any closer to being willing. It's possible that Putin wouldn't mind a pause. He can regroup, he can rearm, he can think, I've got 20% of the territory and I'll hold it. I'll come back and I'll get them later. It's possible he's willing to do that. He wants more if he can get it, but his fallback position may not be. But this is what Trump wants to figure out. Once Trump knows that, and particularly if he gets a ceasefire, then he can convene a trilateral meeting, bring in Zelensky, and they can try to work something out. Again, what do I mean by work something out? Zelensky and the Ukrainians do not want to. The most important for them is that they retain their independence, their freedom, their sovereignty. If they lose some land, that's bad, but it's not a mortal wound. Why do I say that? I'm going to give you a little quick history. In 1939, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, tried to take over Finland. Everybody thought, anybody was watching, this won't be hard. Finland's a tiny little country. What can they do? They fought like crazy. And at the end of the day, they retained their independence, but they lost a good 10% of their territory, particularly Karelia, which was an important thing. And they never got it back. In this case, if I'm a Ukrainian, I might think, okay, he's going to hold it, but at some time, Putin's going to die. Putin's going to move on. There's going to be a succession. And it may not be a smooth succession because they don't have that kind of system. There are no obvious successors to Putin. At that time, maybe we get to take our territory back. That could be the case. Or it could not be. They could lose part of their territory, but retain their independence. And I do think that's the bottom line if you're a Ukrainian, because you don't want to be ruled by Russia. And you don't want to be ruled by Putin, who's been putting Stalin monuments up around the country. And you know that in the 1930s, Stalin made a famine in Ukraine to punish Ukrainian farmers who were against being collectivized under socialism and killed something like 3 million Ukrainians. By the way, there's one other thing I just want to point out to you because I think it's fun. They're meeting in Alaska. What did Alaska used to be? A Russian colony. In the 19th century, it was Russian, and the U.S. bought Alaska from the Russians. Now, ultra-Russian nationalists say, just like they say, Ukraine is really ours. It's part of Russia. You know what else they say? Alaska is really ours. America shouldn't have it. We didn't sell it to them. Maybe we leased it to them for a while. We should get it back. And they would if they could. And I just, one more, the Russian imperialists came all the way through Alaska and all the way down to Northern California. In fact, they had a fort 90 miles or so north of San Francisco. If you go visit it, it's interesting. It's called Fort Russ, but that's really from Fort Rus. Like
what do you make of that location then? Because do you think that would even come up in the conversation? Is Putin one of those Russians that wants Alaska back?
I doubt Putin is going to put that into the negotiations, but I could imagine him saying, good to see you here. This used to be ours, and maybe they have a kind of a laugh over it. I don't know. I think it's an interesting location to have. It's in the U.S. It's not far from Russia. I'm not sure how much that'll be discussed. Who knows how long the conversation will be and what other topics will come up. But I think it's interesting historically and interesting for listeners and viewers to realize that we bought Alaska. It was a pretty good deal. I think it was $7.5 million. Of course, invested properly, that money would be worth a lot more today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it is an interesting tidbit. Zelensky, though, he had a meeting today with European leaders as well as President Trump, and this is what he said about it. He said, "I told President Trump and all our European allies that Putin is bluffing." He also added that Russia wants to occupy the whole of Ukraine and that Putin does not want peace. Do you think that President Trump is going to take that to heart? I mean, what do you make of that statement?
The Zelensky's statement is simply factually accurate. The Europeans are not at this meeting either. I think they would like to be. They have a role to play, but I think mostly that role is for the NATO members to spend the money to purchase American arms and transfer them to the Ukrainians. That's good work. That's what they should do. That's what they can do. There is one other thing that Trump will be considering. I hope he does. And that is something like $300 billion in Russian funds in Europe right now that are essentially frozen. If these war crimes are going to continue, if Putin is going to refuse even a ceasefire, those funds should be taken and they should be used for two purposes: to rearm Ukraine and for reparations to Ukraine for the damage that has been done by Russia. That money should be gone and they should not go back to Russia under any circumstances, and that should be part of the pressure. And if Trump likes and he wants to tell Putin, the things I can do to you, if you are not going to come along, then that's what he should do. He should specify, if he wants to, all the measures he can take to make life uncomfortable for Putin.
And he didn't fully express all of those measures today. He had a back and forth exchange with a reporter. I want to read that full exchange. A reporter asked Trump, "Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?" Trump says, "Yes, they will." The reporter says, "What will they be? Sanctions, tariffs?" And then Trump said, "I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences." What do you think those consequences should be? I know you said they should be severe economic pressures. And B, do you think that President Trump should lay out all of those consequences on the table on Friday during that meeting?
I understand why he didn't want to do it to a reporter. It's fine. I think I can guess pretty well, and I just have for you sanctions, secondary sanctions, taking the Russian wealth in Europe, using it for Ukraine, supplying munitions. Those are the obvious things. Anybody should be able to figure that out. Trump doesn't need to say it to the press. He could say it privately to Putin. He could not. He could say, "Use your imagination, Vladimir. You know what I can do. And I'm going to do it if I have to. Don't make me. All I'm asking for is a ceasefire and the start of some negotiations between you and Zelensky so that we can end the killing. I'm a humanitarian. my job is to end wars when I can. I've in the few months I've been president, I've ended several conflicts. At least I put a halt to them. Let's see if we can get a ceasefire. Let's see if we can extend that into some kind of armistice. But right now, I'm telling you, here's what I want. You can walk away and tell me no, and then I'll have to do what I have to do. I don't know. I can't say whether it's best for Trump to be very, very specific. Probably not, I would say. Again, Putin knows what's up Trump's sleeve.
And best case scenario, I think, from this meeting is there's an immediate ceasefire. But what do you think the most likely outcome is from Friday's meeting?
There will either be a ceasefire or there won't. I think it's very binary here. What I would hope not to see is Trump making concessions to Putin that have to do with Ukrainian land or promises to demilitarize or other things like that, giving concessions in exchange for a ceasefire. If that happens, then we would have to conclude that Trump had not succeeded in this negotiation. And Trump is a pretty good negotiator. I think he's quite well aware of what it means to walk out of the room having done well, having done better than his adversary. He's negotiated against a lot of people, none probably quite as tough, certainly none with the kind of homicidal background that Putin has. So I think we should wish Trump well. I think it's important for Ukrainians. I think it's important for Russians too. Again, a lot of Russians are getting killed because Putin wants the legacy of having restored an important part of the Russian/Soviet empire.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for, and unfortunately, we won't be flies on the wall in that room. But I'm sure, and I hope that you can join me again and we can talk about the developments as they come out. Cliff May, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate our conversations. You're welcome back anytime.
I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, Brittany.